जी हाँ जी हाँ, प्रारंभ कीजिए।
आप सभी का स्वागत सर। मैं नरेंद्र सिसोदिया साहब से निवेदन करूंगा कि आगे की मीटिंग की कार्रवाई करें सर। धन्यवाद सर।
गुप्ता साहब पधार गए, आप पधार गए।
जी हाँ, मैं हाजिर हूँ।
On behalf of Jigyasa Forum of All India Pensioners Association, I am delighted to welcome you all to this Zoom meeting today. जैसा कि आप सब लोगों को मालूम है, लॉकडाउन होने के आप मुझे सुन पा रहे हैं?
हाँ जी हाँ।
बाद में महसूस किया कि हमें कुछ न कुछ एक्टिविटी करनी चाहिए और thanks to technology, especially Zoom, we have been able to organize a few sessions, very useful sessions, very interesting sessions. Side benefit of these sessions is that at least we can all get together and have some communication. Because of the lockdown, we are unable to meet each other in person, but at least virtually we can meet and have some kind of a conversation. So in the past, we have had some useful discussions, one on financial literacy recently, another two recent talks were on financial literacy, and then on taxes, which was given by Arun Kumar Saab, very interesting. And this time we requested Khanna Saab, who has very rich experience in education sector, to give us some salient features of the national education policy and his own critique on it. He kindly agreed. So my only job is to welcome you all. We hope to continue this series of conversations and dialogue in future also. And we earnestly request you to please stay in touch. Please join in for future meetings. I think it's a very good opportunity for us to communicate, meet, and have a conversation on some worthwhile topics. मैं माफी चाहता हूँ, मैं कुछ अंग्रेजी का उपयोग इसलिए कर रहा हूँ कि कुछ लोग बाहर से भी आए हैं, बेंगलोर से भी उन्होंने ज्वाइन किया है। अब मैं हमारे जो अध्यक्ष महोदय हैं एलसी गुप्ता साहब, उनसे निवेदन करूंगा कि वो औपचारिक रूप से आज की कार्रवाई प्रारंभ करें। गुप्ता साहब
जी धन्यवाद। आप सभी महानुभावों का जिज्ञासा व्याख्यान माला में इस अगली कड़ी में आपका स्वागत है। जैसा अभी सिसोदिया साहब ने बताया, इस कड़ी में कई वार्ताएं अभी तक हो चुकी हैं और जो इसके विषय विशेषज्ञ हैं उन लोगों से हम निवेदन करके उन्हें हमेशा यहाँ आमंत्रित करते हैं और वो कृपा करके यहाँ हमें शामिल होकर के अपना विचारों का से हमें लाभान्वित करते रहे हैं। आज का विषय जैसा अभी सिसोदिया साहब ने बताया, नई एजुकेशन पॉलिसी जो नई शिक्षा नीति है उसके ऊपर है और इसके संबंध में इंद्रजीत खन्ना साहब से अच्छा और कोई व्याख्याकार हमको दिखता नहीं था। इससे अच्छा हो नहीं सकता। शिक्षा से और शिक्षा विभाग से और शिक्षा की नीति से इनका बहुत निकट का संबंध रहा है और इनके विचारों से हम लाभान्वित होंगे। मैं एक बार फिर से आप सभी महानुभावों का स्वागत करता हूं और खन्ना साहब का आभार व्यक्त करता हूं कि उन्होंने अपनी स्वीकृति प्रदान की आज के इस व्याख्यान में शामिल होने के लिए। धन्यवाद।
कर दें? बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया लक्ष्मीचंद जी, नरेंद्र और मेरे दो सहयोगी मेरी गीता वित्तल फाउंडेशन की तरफ से सुजीत जो मेरे बगल में अभी बैठे हैं और मनीष जो अभी घर से हमको कंट्रोल कर रहे हैं। मैंने इनको जान के रखा, मैंने कहा मेरे घर बैठे हुए वैसे तो मैं करता हूँ लेकिन ग्लिचेस हो जाएं तो उसमें विलम्ब भी होता है और कभी कभी काफ़ी बाधा भी आ जाती है। तो आई थॉट आई विल बी एट दी सेंटर एंड शेयर माई थॉट्स विथ यू ऑल। लक्ष्मीचंद जी ने कई बातें कही, सिसोदिया ने भी कही, ऐसा नहीं है ना, मैं कोई एक्सपर्ट नहीं हूँ शिक्षा में, रुचि ज़रूर रखता हूँ। और थोड़ा बहुत एक्सपीरियंस है, क्योंकि मैंने इस क्षेत्र में राज्य में काम किया है, इस क्षेत्र में भारत सरकार में भी काम किया है, और इस क्षेत्र में दोनों के बाहर एक अन्य संस्था में भी काम किया है जो शिक्षा देती है एक टीचर के रूप में. So that being the sum and substance of whatever I can claim to be my experience, I have made this effort. I have read the policy, and I think that's why Narendra picked on me, unfortunately, to try and share some of my thoughts. Somewhat critical, but there are good things also in it. So let me begin now. I'll have the slides come in one by one. I wanted to start with Gandhiji's thoughts on education. A teacher, and I'll read them, there are 3 sentences, basically 3 paragraphs, short ones. A teacher who establishes rapport with the taught, becomes one with them, learns from them more than he teaches them. The real difficulty is that people have no idea of what education truly is. Quite a harsh sentence. We want to provide only such education as would enable the student to earn more. We hardly give any thought to the improvement of the character of the educated. This is one point which Arun has very, very often stressed to me, that we miss out in our process of growing up, both at home and in the classes, the 20 years of our life initially, the character aspect. And I think it is very well brought out here. Education is not merely a means to achieve status or earn money. Rather, it should bring freedom to the individual. He advocated the fact that kids must be imparted with vocational education, which is a good way to learn and know things. So basically, I should not, गांधी जी के thoughts के ऊपर हमारे को कीवर्ड निकालना जरा उचित नहीं है, पर फिर भी मैंने कहा टीचर, कैरेक्टर, फ्रीडम एंड वोकेशनल एजुकेशन, coming from the thoughts of the father of the nation. Now, I have taken some preliminary observations and then come to some pairwise observations. I am disturbed by 2 aspects in the beginning. Para 9.1 states that in developing India as envisaged in its constitution, and then there's a mark, democratic, just, socially conscious, cultured, and humane. Now, since we are picking it out of the constitution and have it in the national education policy, that's what concerns me. And I want to quote the constitution on this. The preamble, which is really the sum and substance of all that is in the constitution, says that we are a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. 5 words. Why has this national education policy missed out 2 very crucial words here, socialist and gangster? Again, from the constitutional aspect, that at a number of places, certain articles of the constitution or provisions of the constitution have been mentioned. But according to me, a very crucial article of the constitution, Article 30, and of these, about 90,000 are in the primary sector. Now, just tell me, one teacher teaching 5 classes simultaneously, is it humanly possible? 1,10,000, of which 90,000 are primary schools, and we are saying we are emphasizing primary schools. Now, it disturbs me, and I know they are private schools. They pay, they charge heavy fee, but at the level of the little children, there are 2 teachers per, and here we have 1 teacher per 5 classes. This is where I think we need, in this system of 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, which is very good. I hope that we must get this in order. It's very expensive. It's very expensive because 1,10,000 teachers, paying them extra. Of course, getting good teachers is the basic thing, but the financial part will also be something. I'll come to that again. I think today the teachers in primary schools after the 7th Pay Commission are getting reasonable salaries. By Indian standards, I don't want to compare them with the developed world. By Indian standards, at joining, they are reasonably good salaries after the 7th Pay Commission. But in accordance with their salaries, are they giving back to the system and particularly to the children what they should? I'm a little skeptical on that. The next point is on the preliminary observation. I think I have only one or two more. Is on financing of education. We have missed out on that to a considerable extent. It was there in the first education policy, first I think 64, 66, which is called the Hari Commission. Around GDP, 2% was there at that time. They said we should get to somewhere near 6%. I attended a meeting way back in 92, if I'm not wrong, but I remember because Mr. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister and he addressed that meeting that we will reach the level of 6%. We are still at 2%, 2.5%, maybe close to 3%. And here I think the point which is missing in the policy is there is no time frame in which we are going to achieve this 6%. Extremely important. And I want to go back. See, where we fail is this thing. The monitoring is very important. Is we set a timeline but do not break that up. I'll give an example. In England, Margaret Thatcher had decided that she will cut the expenditure to universities by 10% over 5 years. Very clear. And it was added there that every year it will be cut by 2%. And they achieved it. The universities were told, you do whatever you like, every year 2% you will cut. Now, coming back and putting it into the current context, I say that if you are serious about 6%, then say simultaneously that 1% every year we will increase this investment in terms of the GDP. That would have been a better thing to say, and it needs to be better monitored. And the last general point I'm making, of course, is all from the policy itself, that while there are a few guidelines, a few timelines, in many cases they have been left unchecked. Maybe I'll take them out. Now, I want to come to the main policies. The para-wise I will take, not all, but some. I wanted to start with Rabindranath Tagore in this, because like Ashok and Naren Sisodia will remember, this is in my memory since my college days. It must have hit me at that time. I don't think I had read Tagore before. And this is a beautiful poem of his from Gitanjali. I'm going to read out the first and the last line and leave it for you to read. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free. Into that heaven of freedom, my father, let my country wait. Now, as I said, way back in 1959 or something, I heard this. And it has stuck with me. So obviously, that is the scenario we should be looking for. It's broad-based. Somebody may take a view, say, why in education is it relevant? For me, I think it is. And it came to me from my college days. Now, para 2.2. I'm picking up some paras. This para rightly emphasizes that the highest priority of the education system will be achieved through universal foundational literacy and numeracy in primary school. As I said, this is laying the foundation, and we missed out by not emphasizing this aspect in the initial years after independence. I refer to ASER, which is actually the annual status of education report. Some of these acronyms don't always come to mind immediately. The acronym does, but the main thing doesn't. So it says that about 30% of children at age 3 and 15.6% children at age 4 are not enrolled anywhere. This achievement, as prescribed in NEP 2020 by 2025, is, according to me, totally unrealistic. The hollowness of this unrealistic target is brought out again by this very ASER of 2019 that further states that in the age group 5 to 8 years in government schools, that is about standard 1, about 53.2% cannot even read letter, and another 45.6 children in this very age group cannot recognize numbers. Now, one may contest it that the sample size is not big enough for others, but if it is not 52.3%, it is a large percentage. Now, again, no timeline has been fixed, and this is stated rightly according to as the highest priority. Now, no timeline has been fixed for this highest priority. I totally accept that it is desirable to fill teachers' vacancies, which are very large in number, in a time-bound manner. Time-bound said, but no timeline fixed. Because the timeline not only has to be given, but has to be realistic also. Having administered so long ago primary and secondary education, I know how difficult it is to fill up vacancies. The political aspect, the legal aspect. So, taking all that into account, I think the least we could do when we give this as a objective to be achieved, filling teacher vacancies, that we should have fixed the timeline. Of course, I'll come to the issue of good teachers and who are good teachers. Another lofty ideal is that every literate member of the community should commit to teaching one school. Now, this is difficult. And giving ideals which are not achievable in realistic timelines, I think may not be worth too much. I want to give an example which happened many years ago. Is an experiment which the government of Mexico took up in the late 1970s. Professor Samuel Paul has brought it out in his book, Strategic Management of Government Programs, and this was one of the 7 or 8 programs he took up. Into the rural areas and making them stay there and teach. Under this, they picked up children who had completed the class 10 equivalent level and said, serve in your village as a teacher for 2 years. Training for 3 months, and after that, you give your service for 2 years. After 2 years, we will give you the benefit of selection, some reservation type, into technical institutions, etc., institutions of higher learning. And it was a great success because in Professor Paul's book, it is mentioned as one of the success stories. And one of our problems is, do we have teachers staying in school in the village? No. I remember in my time, the story used to be that there was a letter left on the desk. It said, today I am on leave. No day.
कोई नंबर जाकर पकड़ लेता नहीं यही बैटिंग करेगा तो मैं क्या करेगा
there's some disturbance. No date, and one bright child was told that if any inspector comes, please show him this letter. So the absence was 1 day, though it may have been in reality 15 days. Now that would not happen if the teacher is from the school. I mentioned this experiment, and it was a very successful experiment. The other aspect is that the out-of-school children in the age group 6 to 17, in this report, in this policy report itself, is about 3.22 million. I don't know whether on the screen, because I get some of the parts, Manish, which are cut out. That is this figure of 3.22 crores. Whether the others can see it or not, I'm not sure. Yeah. So bringing them back, and another aspect which is crucial in education and administering education, managing education, is retaining the children. You have to retain them for now 17, 18 years. So the education The challenge is really to not only get them, the dropouts, but also to retain them over the entire period of time. Lack of proper infrastructure, this is para 3.2. Very correct. Very correct. One good thing that happened, but somehow good things emerge only in this country more from the courts than from the system. Supreme Court passed an order that midday meal will be given to all schools going to children at the primary level. Later it went to 8th class. I don't know now it is secondary. And the precursor is the government of Tamil Nadu had done. It had done it earlier. I think Jayalalitha was the chief minister. I'm not very sure, but that was there. Now there are two things in there. Number one, nourishment, and number two, it attracts children. Where we talk of the lack of enrollment, etc., to come to school. They look forward to something, and I think this has increased. It has gone countrywide now, and is doing well. The other, of course, is more mundane, which are lacking proper drinking water, proper toilets, and those particularly for girls. So, well, I accept the statement in the policy that this will be lack of proper infrastructure is a serious problem. I hope that over time, I know unfortunately this policy has come at a bad time. Bad time in the sense that this is COVID time. So really, for government to be able to do anything, even if it wants to, is difficult. Schools are not there today, not functioning. Children are not going. For example, take this only, midday meal. How will they get midday meal? So it's a bad time to have put in this policy, but all right, chalo kar diya hai, so now we have to look ahead. Now, another thing which I felt is very, very important to share with you, and I have confirmed this because this was there in my time, but I am totally out of date, but I spoke to the present Director of Education, there is a boys' fund. And what I used to experience whenever I visited schools in the 70s, the first thing I would see, I'm an administrator, not a teacher, but bathroom कैसा है, पंखे हैं कि नहीं, white wash हुई है कि नहीं, drinking water कैसा है, and I found these totally in a very poor condition. Boys fund में पैसा होता था, उसको इस्तेमाल करना डरते थे हेडमास्टर, सर आज भी डरते हैं, and I think so because the word used by my young friend who is today the Director of Primary Secondary Education, please don't hold it against him, बाबूजी, तो LDC जो है वो डरा के रखता है. तो हेडमास्टर साहब कहते हैं ऑडिट ऑब्जेक्शन मुझे फेस करना होगा, मैं क्यों इसमें खर्च करूं. तो यू विल फाइंड क्लासरूम्स इन द विलेजेस व्हिच आर देयर, गर्मी में पंखे में, एंड सो ऑन. Now it has to be addressed, and mind you, the amount is not small. Even in a school, this was given to me by the director in his assessment, in a school of 500 children, every year this may be about 1 lakh of rupees. Not small money. In addition, they get something called today a composite bill. Of course, I am talking in the Rajasthan context, but I am quite sure similar things are available in many, if not all, other states of the country. This should be spent. The money is there to spend so that children have a better environment in which to study. Then I take on paras 3.6, 8.3 and 8.3 together. Something quite close to my heart, and I think many of those who are into this talk today have gone through private schools. Why did our parents send us to private schools? They were slightly better than the government schools. There are many government schools which are good even today. Delhi government talks about their schools being as good, if not better, than the private schools in Delhi. Accept it. But when you acknowledge, and the NEP is acknowledging the role of private institutions, I know the pinpricks that they face. I used to advise some people, there's a grant in aid system, which some of the education secretaries, former who may be present here, would know, grant in aid. And I used to tell private institutions who came to me, I said, for God's sake, don't come to me for grant. Because somebody will come and find some wretched fault with you, and you will be answering government offices. Many don't today. But I am happy that they wanted the role of private educational institutions to be encouraged. and by philanthropic organizations. I'll come to that a little more. And I hope people will not mind, quoted Mao Zedong, who says, let 100 flowers bloom. 100 is there, I would say thousands bloom in the context of private educational institutions, no pinpricks, but also no commercialization. Come down with a heavy hand where you have to, which should be very little, but otherwise let them go and let them give education. When we send our children and grandchildren to private institutions, why are we belittling their contribution? Para 3.7, some are lofty ideals. I don't know whether they should have been in this policy. Involving community and alumni in volunteer efforts and one-on-one tutoring are lofty ideals which are difficult. One-on-one tutoring. How many of us will come forward to tutor? Of course, the director mentioned when I was speaking to him, probably he's very idealistic, which is good, that, sir, some of you can mentor these little children. I said, yes, good, because they may have to come to our house for a little while, but we are willing, and we would, I'm sure many of us present here will offer themselves, but it's still at a large scale. It is a lofty ideal. Whether it should have been in the policy or not, I feel it need not have. Now I come to a very important issue, which is language. Very sensitive, very important. How do we go about it? The policy says, but first let me mention a historical aspect where I think we lost out that opportunity. Indonesia, when it became independent, and it has about 1,000 islands, I was told, with Java, the biggest island with the maximum population, 90%. Javanese is the population. But the president, if I'm not wrong, it was Sukarno, he probably must have realized that this is going to cause a problem. So he picked up the language of one of the smallest of these islands and said, this is going to be our national language, which is now called Bhasa in Indonesia. And while the Javanese still speak Javanese, this is the national language, the language spoken by one of the smallest islands in Indonesia. But I thought I would share it. We lost this opportunity, but still now we have to live with the current context. Now, the policy says the mother tongue. I am all with the mother tongue. But there are situations. Now you cannot, in Hindi, मैं ये कहूँगा, थोपना नहीं है किसी चीज को किसी पर. और बच्चे के इंटरेस्ट में माँ बाप से ज्यादा चिंतित कौन हो सकता है? सरकार तो नहीं हो सकती, डायरेक्टर एजुकेशन नहीं हो सकती, अध्यापक टू सम एक्सटेंट, यस. So I say, let the parents decide. Obviously, starting with the mother tongue is the most obvious thing. But by and by, if they wish to go in other directions, the system should not inhibit that. The system should not prevent that from happening. I gave an example here. The other day I was hearing Mr. Yechury on the television, also in Parliament, and he had a similar situation. If the mother is from one state, the father is from a second state, and they are presently in a third state, what is the language in which the child should learn? System should not decide it. Let the parents decide if the child is small enough. So I would say, go carefully on this issue. Mother tongue is very important, but ultimately, as the years progress, let the parents who have the best interest of the child in mind decide. Linked with language is the issue of English. मैं अंग्रेजी में बोल रहा हूँ, कभी हिंदी में बोल रहा हूँ, कोशिश करता हूँ, और सवाल ये है कि कब और कहाँ या कहीं भी नहीं अंग्रेजी पढ़ाई जाए. I think we will all acknowledge that in today's context, worldwide, English has become, either we can call it a linked language, certainly a language in which most business is done, and it is necessary for children to know. How much they want to know, how much they should know, again a decision of the parents. Where the system, and I know that what any language, if I am learning German, if I was in Germany, having learned German here for 1 year, I think in a month I would be very fluent, but I am in India. So when I learn English, I don't, particularly the poorer children, don't have that environment. वातावरण नहीं है, ना घर में, ना स्कूल में, ना मित्रों के साथ, ना दुकानदार के साथ. So they know. I've seen that in my Gita Mittal. They have all read English. They can read, but comprehension is one issue, and confidence is another. So here it is the system to the best extent possible by encouraging things like I have said, reading of English newspapers and all these things. You know? So I think that this has to be taken up. I always keep emphasizing to children in this institution here that read the newspaper for half an hour a day. It builds your general knowledge also, apart from improving your knowledge of English, which you miss out in terms of experience. See the TV for half an hour, the news in English. Again, it will help you in improving your general knowledge when you go. And read books in English to the extent possible, and magazines also. I also incidentally brought this, it came to my notice on 16th October, where, of course, I have not given the rest. State government, that is our state government, Rajasthan, plans push for English medium schools. तो अगर अंग्रेजी की आवश्यकता नहीं है, तो फिर ये की, और ये ही कि सबसे पहले मैंने बिहार के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में भी पढ़ा था और यूपी के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में भी पढ़ा है. Because these are the states where children, and why deprive them? They don't have the opportunity in their village school. जिसको कहते हैं ना, वो अंग्रेजी भी हिंदी में अगर अध्यापक है भी तो हिंदी में शायद पढ़ाता है. So we have to develop alternatives which we give to the children so that they become reasonably proficient. Confidence is not there. They must build up that confidence. Again, I'm picking up some paragraphs, some important issues, some not. Again, it says visit to different states. Now, it's all right. I know maybe my child could visit different states. I could afford it. But for the poor children, for the rural children, how is it possible to do it on a large scale? When we talk of the government schools and others, how many will be able to afford? And the government is going to provide for their going and staying and eating and other things. So to include in the policy something which is impractical to achieve, desirable no doubt, but not very practical to achieve, I think it need not be. The second is that the policy says, and rightly, that all curriculum and pedagogy be redesigned and strongly rooted in the Indian and local context. We talk of a world view. Now, I think we should go beyond the Indian context, which is essential, because unless I understand my Indian context, how do I look at the world? But we must not forget the world at large. And it has not been so explicitly stated in the policy itself. Another very important point, which is good, that the curriculum framework in the stakeholders family, who are mentioned in this policy, state government, ministry, relevant departments of the central government, and other expert bodies. Where are parents? Where are teachers? I think, see, you may think it's irrelevant, they are covered, state government may cover over teachers, or you. No. When you are giving a policy and mentioning specifics, then add the two most critical in this. Parents, nobody is more interested in their children's well-being, and the teachers to whom this education is being given. They are not mentioned. You can look up the para 4.3 and 5.2, and this is a very serious omission. You may say, "Bhai, दूसरों में आ जाते हैं." No. Mention करिए उसको specifically. Another very important aspect is that the large number of children even today in our country are first generation children. So the support which many of us do give our children when they are studying, having been educated ourselves, is unfortunately not available to those first generation children. Now, the education system itself will have to provide for it the school, the classroom, and supplemental support, maybe extra classes. But then the teachers must be willing to give those extra classes. Not necessarily always at some remuneration. The will to give that must be there. Achha. Exam, yes. Integral part of the educational system. I'll go a little faster maybe. Important point, but the point is, don't overemphasize it because it puts fear into children. There are all types of children. And pardon me for giving my own context, my school days. I don't remember ever the exam being a challenge for me till senior secondary, and much more so in college. Otherwise, everything went on. The matrix went on, physical activity went on, but there's no pressure. Today, you see the pressure on children. My own granddaughter is now in class 10. Unfortunately, the parents, I also ask her, "Bacha, how are you doing in your exams? Half yearly, how, monthly, how?" So, while the exams have a place, but the system should work in such a way that minimum pressure, particularly on the little children up to class 10 and 12, is felt on them. I mentioned here that in my school, 1 hour of homework a day is what I did. I never carried books. It was a boarding school, doesn't matter. But 1 hour a day. And 2.5 hours of extracurricular activity. Where is that? I don't know. I had a thing of Ajay Devgan, which came, I think Ajay Devgan we have all heard of, I hope. Good actor. He says that what I am missing from my children is today the instruments that they are at and the lack of physical activity that they are undertaking. This somehow, sometimes it is very nice when you are driving around and you see children in the rural countryside playing football or volleyball or some such thing. But those are rare. So the more we sort of try to reduce the emphasis on exams, the final exam, board exam, I think the better off the children will be in their learning process. There are 5.1 and 5.3. This is on teachers. At every stage, it is emphasized, rightly so, the policy, that teachers play a critical role. And to me, they are the most important human being individual associated with this process of education, which is covering about 18 to 20 years of any human being individual's life. Of course, I have mentioned earlier, and I am repeating it, that their training, which includes the BA training, and their selection to the RPSC and such organizations is of greatest importance. I won't say more than that, but I'll tell you something about what a teacher should be. Sometime in college, I don't know when, I had a young teacher, a very bright person, Rhodes Scholar, and also along with being a Rhodes Scholar and having gone to Oxford, he represented India at the Munich Olympics. So he was an absolutely rounded character. Now he was my teacher. Why do I remember him today? Even today, I must have asked him a very simple question in my maths class, which he could not answer in the class. Ashok and Naren may remember Ranjit Bhatia. He, obviously being interested in athletics, was sitting in Jabalpur, and this was written. I have retained this postcard with me. I haven't given it back to the principal of the college. Asked me. I said, "No, it's too dear to me. I'll give you a photocopy, not the original." And in Jabalpur, on 11th February 1962, he writes back to our colleague teacher, Satish Mathur, and says, "Dear Satish, please give the following solution to Indrajit Khanna." Now, here is a teacher sitting in Jabalpur, not in Delhi, attending to athletics, which is so dear to him. And he is still thinking about the problem I may have raised with him. I had forgotten. This is what a teacher is, according to me. I remember. Now, I also remember another important thing, the teacher's dedication and attachment with the institution. 3 of my 5 teachers who taught me in the 50s and early 60s were there in the 90s when I went back, the same school, college. I was surprised. And they had been abroad, they had done their PhDs abroad, but come back to work in the same institution. That is what a teacher is. His dedication to the institution. They must have pride in the institution. That means our schools and our colleges must do their work to keep teachers there. Now, I Again, another poem I remember from my school days. I don't think I was proficient in English. Matthew will pardon me, but this poem, Leisure, these two lines only I am going to read to you, which according to me are very important and they are linked to education. And I read the first and the last line only. What is this life if full of care? We have no time to stand and stare. A poor life this, if full of care, we have no time to stand and stare. Now you will say, what is the relevance of this to education? We need time to be ourselves. And I'll read out to you what Devgan said. I've got this newspaper thing. Exactly, I'll quote it. अपने बचपन को याद करते हुए अजय देवगन ने कहा, जब हम स्कूल जाते थे तो हमारे पास गैजेट नहीं थे उस जमाने में। चलो कोई बात नहीं, हमारे लिए मनोरंजन फिजिकल था, ऑन द फील्ड, नॉट द अदर फिजिकल, ऑन द फील्ड, जो मैं आज के बच्चों में मिस करता हूँ। मैं बच्चों को आउटडोर जाने के लिए लगातार उनके पीछे पड़ा रहता हूँ ताकि वे गैजेट्स पर खेलने के बजाय बाहर खेलें। मुझे लगता है कि ये बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है। नाउ some may say it's frivolous, I don't know, but I think it is extremely important that this part of our system of building a human being in those 20 years is critical. It is not emphasized enough today. Now, I'm repeating this, I know, is the issue of politicization and the transfer. The transfer is what they acknowledge. In para 5.3, you will see that the policy acknowledges it's a problem. Why does it occur? It occurs because of politicization. And that's why I say the policy has missed out. Come head on, accept it and say we don't want it. ठीक है, ये मैं नहीं कह रहा कि 100% वो कभी हट सकता है, नहीं हट सकता, लेकिन कम से कम कहिए तो सही, कहीं ना कहीं तो कोई प्रयास होगा. And this is the bane of the education system. Because other aspects I'm not dealing since I'm talking on education. Some paras deal with the talk of incentive. Now I am a little weary. I am traditional in my approach to things, particularly in government. I do have a little experience in government, and I say that incentive may bring nepotism, or sometimes I would say does bring nepotism. Appointments bring nepotism. Incentive within the system, according to me, brings nepotism. Then you will say, how do we recognize the good work being done and incentivize that good work for others to try to follow? Now, I know earlier also and today, and I'm happy to say that it has increased. Recognition is what I think is the most important. I have fairly often argued that monetary benefits is not the end of the world. If I get recognition from my superior, I think that is one of the best things for me. And we do get it. So I say that instead of this so-called, advanced promotion, which will create problems, rather than that, give recognition in other forms. I know on Teachers' Day, they have national awards. On Teachers' Day, they have state awards in my time. Now, as I find, they have the district level awards also, and the numbers are large. I am told that today, there was of course one national award. State awardees were 99, and district level about 903, up from last year. Now, it's a little monetary award, but much more than that is the certificate that one gets to be kept for posterity in one's house, for one's children, for one's grandchildren. And I think as against monetary incentives, being mentioned advanced promotion, I know how badly it is in colleges and other things, is that there has to be recognition by your superior and through the government. Increase number. Recognize them. Because there used to be 2 years of what is that called? Extension after retirement. I'm told that is not there today. I don't see any reason why a good teacher, properly selected, okay, not backdoor selection, should not be used in the system for 2 more years, though it's not being given today. So, to me, incentives are necessary, not monetary as stated or advanced promotions as stated, but to other forms of recognition. I think any of us who have been, and all of us have been in the civil service, most of us have, if our boss has written on the file that this note is an excellent note, and the file is for posterity, it probably goes up to his boss also. I think nothing can satisfy us or make us more happy. There's no money involved. So recognition can come in many ways. And I think that rather than this type of accelerated promotion and all which is talked about in this policy, we can think of other ways to give recognition. The next is again that point I made in the beginning about Article 30 and the minorities. I won't dwell on it much more now. That in 3 lines, the issue of minorities has been disposed of, which I think is a little unfortunate. And more could have been said, and the protection given to them under Article 30. This is something which is missed out. Para 6.8 talks of a gender inclusion fund, which is excellent. And I think it's a good thing that this should be there. But it says, and this is where I have some, let us say, problem, is, however, and I'm quoting now from the policy, states will implement only priorities determined by the central government. Now, why on hell should these states be forced to implement? Can they not think for themselves? Gender inclusion fund as a concept is beautiful. It is necessary. But where is the involvement of the states? The states must be actively involved in formulation and implementation of the scheme. But will implement the priorities determined by the central government. Why? I have mentioned the issue of the single teacher schools. I'll just very in half a minute before we talk. I think there should have been a timeline. See, this is linked to the financial problem also. Of course, there are issues like selection, training, and all that. But that this should have been given. This is a very serious problem, and it should have been given a proper timeline. According to me, minimum 10 years. And then year-wise breakup in the policy itself. Think about it. You are talking to the states, so bring them together and frame out a year by year. I give you that example of the Thatcher government and the reduction of 10%. Fix a 1 year timeline, monitor it. And by and large, I have said it again, teachers should be from the village level. Now, also a point covered earlier, the acknowledges that the current regulatory regime has all too often discouraged public-spirited private and philanthropic schools. I was talking to one of the persons from a private school, and he emphasized that there are 2 types, and we have to be careful when we talk about it. One is the corporate, set up by the corporate, under the CSR and all that type of thing. We have to be careful. They not only can invest more, but their motives may not be all that clean. Philanthropic, sometimes not clean, but that doesn't mean for a few bad fish, all should be covered with the same brush. That is the problem, and with my little experience even today, I find that the princes are not going to encourage philanthropic schools. No doubt, come down with a heavy hand where if you feel commercialization is taking place. But that does not mean that surpluses should not be kept. Education requires revamping very frequently, improvements. And for that, if a surplus is kept apart, which is monitored, it is not a bad thing. It is not commercialization. I'm giving another example, and which I am just now aware, that when the government opens a school, the easiest thing for government is to give government land. Government is the owner of all the land in the country. It is free. A private institution, whether it is philanthropic or corporate, has to pay crores of rupees. And I've given the example that 4 acres in the rural areas of Gurgaon is costing about 25 crores. I was told that in Dwarka, which is on the outskirts of Delhi, one of the outskirts, it's in more than 100 crores when they go for auction for these activities, which are the soft activities like the medical sector or the education. Who will pay 100 crores, 40 crores, 50 crores? And then you want them to come be actively involved. So we have to try to marry these situations in a proper and be genuine about it. Now I am coming to the higher education, very brief, you may say. Now I picked up, I was looking at an old magazine. Pardon me if I have mentioned the name, Kapil Sibal and St. Stephen's College, but I thought this was very well said by him. And I'll read it out to you. You will realize, and I'm quoting from that speech of his at the service, as you participate in the bustle of everyday life, that your education was not really what you learned so much in the classroom, enabling you to pass an examination, but the experience of being here, the experience of understanding each other, the experience of being sensitive to each other, the experience of exchanging thoughts and ideas. It is the wealth of this experience that is called education. Education is the ability to absorb, the ability to learn, and thereby constantly apply that learning to yourself to enable you to become a better human. Some people may not like my quoting Kapil Sibal, I don't know, but I think that he said it very, very nicely. Quickly now taking up the higher education, it mentions autonomous institutions of higher learning and encouraging them. Wonderful, wonderful. But what is the reality? Out of thousands and thousands of colleges, 675 are autonomous today. Now, NEP again rightly is emphasizing the importance of autonomy. What does autonomous mean? Some people may not have the correct. See, today, the worst part of the higher education system particularly is the rigidity. I'll give two examples very quickly. I hope I won't be misunderstood, but since it is real life, having done science at the graduation level and unfortunately got a first division, I wanted to go for the civil services. I wanted to do history for obvious reasons. The University of Delhi declined. Then I had to do my MSc, waste my time, do 3 papers in the UPSC. Now, why could I not say? There is a person who was in our center, and she wants to, because her family circumstances is in the army now, her husband, and army officers are moving to small towns. Education, teaching was a good option. Though I BTech, I cannot understand why that BTech lady cannot get admission to a BA college. See, in all cases, the rigidity of the system is not allowing her to join a BA course. The risk is of the individual. If I, as a physics student, want to start studying philosophy or education, I am putting my neck forward and putting myself at risk. Why should the system disallow me? So, I think that while stressing the importance of autonomy, which is very good, and let me say, the rigidity of the university system will go. Today, I cannot start a new course in a college. Now, I would say that if I have this autonomy, all that the university will give is the degree. The institution will teach. The curriculum will be of its institution. The institution will conduct the exam. The only thing is the degree. This is part of the UGC policy, but they don't do it. To the best, I should not say it, to the best of institutions, they are hanging on for political reasons for 4 years. Reject. Only yesterday I was saying, reject it. Let it become a thing if the press wants to pick up. But they can't reject, and they can't accept. And third-rate institutions, unfortunately, do get autonomy. I'm not naming any, but the concept is excellent. The implementation is not. Extracurricular activities I have mentioned. Now I'll take para 15.1. Now, sometimes it troubles me. Says that teachers must be grounded in Indian values, without exception. But why only Indian values? Are there not other values, larger values? Do we not learn from others? And do we not give to others also? It's a reciprocal system. But by using the word only Indian values, not well. If it had said values, it was absolutely 100%. But by saying Indian values and excluding, not mentioning that there are values other than that, I think it's something which is a little missing. In the next one, and I'm referring to the policy document, MEP, that Justice Verma Commission, he talked about the teacher education institutions which are selling degrees, of course, a damning indictment, and rightly so. And it has to be corrected. Better teacher training institutions, it's inevitable. Now, vocational education. Another thing reasonably dear to my heart. Welcome, welcome. But what if the system is rigid? That is why I never picked up from Kothari Commission. We had a so-called wonderful high-power committee on education in Rajasthan 75, and we did not succeed. Why? Because the university said that a child who has done class 12 in, say, a vocational trade, electrician or something, cannot join history. Why not? He is putting his own sort of neck out. Let him join. Of course, he will compete. Whatever is the system, but he wants to join, what is the problem? And I am taking this example from our services. If a doctor can become a superintendent of police, if an engineer can become the district magistrate, why on earth can a carpenter not join a physics honor? Why are you depriving him this opportunity? Open that door too. A bright child will succeed. If he has taken a wrong decision, he will fail. But the system today is not allowing it. I told you, the B.Tech child is not being allowed to do B.A. This is not what even the policy envisages. The policy says vocational education has to be encouraged, yes. But even the process, your system is so rigid that future avenues are close to him. Who will take up vocational education? Now, also, it talks, and this is a very important point in the context of higher education systems, of, I say, it's called the Higher Education Commission of India they want to set up. And under it, they call it vertical, they will have things like the UGC and AICTE and so on and so forth, excluding, I think, medical education. Now, I'm not convinced of that because I'm very conservative. Rocking the boat, according to me, is not a good thing, in government particularly. Let the systems continue, strengthen them, depoliticize them, put the best. There's so much of talent in our country. Professors included, teachers included. Put the best. Don't interfere. Let them act. Of course, if there's gross violation of anything, then you interfere. But otherwise, why? And one more organization. I, for one, having worked also in the UGC, I say you strengthen it. Give it more powers, give it the money that it requires to the extent that if you think is feasible. It's a dialogue. Now, digital education and online education. Very, very important. Necessary, but not sufficient. Problems in India, connectivity, availability. Fortunately, we have not had any glitches, I think, in this 1 hour that I have been with you. Connectivity will be a problem, availability will be a problem, and affordability. So while it is necessary to move in that direction, it is not sufficient. I quoted some figures from the ASER 2020, which has just come out about the access to this type. But I'm not belittling what digital education can do, but it's not a substitute. And finally, I'm concluding. I go back to 60 years, but I still think that is relevant and good. And I'm quoting now, I got the wrong one. Jawaharlal Nehru, Prime Minister of India, very small school, Junior Modern School of New Delhi. Those were the days. And what he says, I want to end with this. I am pleased with the type of education imparted in the modern school. I would like every Indian child to have the opportunity of studying in a school like modern school. I hope this will be achieved in course of time. He probably thought in his lifetime, but 60 years down the line, I don't think we are anywhere near that facility being available. And since government is the provider of about 60% of educational opportunities in the country, I think they have to think very, very seriously of this, which was said so rightly 60 years ago. Thank you very much. Open for questions. I hope there are none. Thank you.